Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Now I know it's been a good minute since I've last posted a video, so I kind of do apologize for that. I just kind of got a bit lazy and didn't really feel like uploading any videos, but I think I'm back now, probably, hopefully. So I think for today's video, I'm going to start by going over Apex tests. Now I know this is like one of the most requested video topics I've been asked about for quite a while now, and I have kind of resisted going into this topic. Well, one, because I'm lazy, like how I said, but two, because like the world of testing, like code just in general, can kind of be complex, and there's like a lot to it. And depending on how deep you want to go into it, and the architecture of your system and how you want to set things up, it can get complex, and it's just a lot of work. So I kind of been avoiding it. But I think for today, we'll start off with like the most extreme basics, and we'll kind of go from there. And as always, just a quick little disclaimer, and I've even put that in my about section now, right here. Just remember, as always, that I'm just a random dude posting videos on the internet to share what I know. But again, nothing that I post is meant for use in production environment. Essentially, don't just blindly trust and copy whatever I'm doing. I want to help as much as possible, but I'm not like a super crazy expert, so just keep that in mind when we're going over this type of stuff. All right, so let's jump into it. And I think for today, well, like I said, we're gonna just start off with like the extreme basics. And on my screen here, what you're seeing is a very simple and very badly written piece of code. And that's on purpose, just so we can kind of go over how Apex test works and like the mentality behind it. But what you'll see here is I'm using Visual Studio Code, and now I've mentioned this like in almost every single one of my videos. But if you're not familiar with how to get this set up, I do have a video that I've created in the past on how to get this going. So if you're interested in that, I'll hopefully remember to post a video link in the description box below. So feel free to check that out. But anyway, so you can see here, I've created an Apex test class. It's just called Apex Test Basics, and it only has one static method called add numbers. It accepts a list of strings, and essentially what it's doing, it's going to just add all the elements in that list. So if I'm sure you guys are seeing like there's a bunch of problems with this code here, like very easy to break it and all that good stuff. But that's exactly kind of like the point of it. Now, let's go ahead and kind of just quickly do some execute anonymous Apex to see kind of how this works. So I actually already have that open here. If you're not familiar with it, you can go to where it says scripts, Apex, and you can create a new file, or just use the one that I believe that the hello.apex is a file that just already kind of exists when you create a new project from scratch. But I created one called Apex Test Basics. None of this is really relevant. Essentially, I wrote some simple code right here. We're going to create a list right here. It just has 1, 2, 3 as string elements. We call the method and we store the sum as a string, and then we just, debug it out to the system. So, if you click on execute anonymous Apex, the thing will run, and then we should be able to see here, sum is 6. So, in this scenario, it's working fine, right? But as I'm sure you can kind of already gleaned and guessed, there's a lot of issues with this code, and obviously this code would never be in production, and why would you even want an add numbers method like this? But the whole point is to kind of showcase how testing works, and like how at least how I go about thinking of creating test cases. So let's just assume this was some code in production, right? And I guess we can kind of start by going over like what is the point of tests in the first place, and then we can kind of we'll just start from there. So the point of test, well, at least in the Apex world, you're not able to deploy any code to production unless I believe you have code coverage of like 70% or higher. So, that's one point right there, right? But going past that, the point of writing tests isn't just to kind of get, coverage necessary to deploy this to production, but more so to test the functionality of your logic, or test that your logic is actually working as expected, that it doesn't have bugs, that there's no logical issues with it, right? That's really the gist of it. With here, this is just a very simple function right here. But as an example, and I'm just kind of going abstractly before we jump into the actual test class itself. But think of this right here, right? So as an example, we have this add numbers function right here, or method right here, and it accepts a list of strings. Now I know this doesn't really make sense because we're kind of typecasting it to an integer and all that good stuff. But as an example, a test case could be like, all right, well, let's ensure that this function can actually add numbers together, right? So like a test case could be test that it can add a few integers or something like that, right? And then second example could be like test that logic doesn't break if strings are added in a list, because this is a list of strings. And I know, like I said already a few times, this code is very badly written on purpose, but you kind of start to see how you can build these tests yourselves. You can kind of think of it as let's say this logic right here is the result of some design specs that you received, right? And now you want to start thinking about all the scenarios in which that code might not behave as expected. So like I said right here, we want to ensure that the code itself can actually add integers when it receives a list of integers. What about when we pass in a string with those list of integers, right? Like, should it break, or what should happen in a scenario? And then we can even go further and test that logic. We can even say accepts decimals or something like that. There's so many things you can kind of do here. And then you can even say test that logic can add integers and decimals, right? If that was functionality in here. And I'm kind of just writing things off at this point. Test that logic can ignore non-numeric values, or alternatively, I guess you can say maybe if that's not what you wanted, you could say returns some other value. So we can say returns null if there is a non-numeric value. But more so, it's just the point of writing these tests is to ensure that your logic is behaving as expected. And we're really thinking about scenarios in which it wouldn't work, or edge cases, you can think of it that way. But really the whole point of tests, aside from making sure that you have enough code coverage to push it to production and ensuring that that your logic is working as expected, is really because suppose a scenario in which this code is a result of the initial specs that you receive from your manager or something, right? And then down the line they're like, oh, we want you to add to this code or this logic, modify it a little bit or extend it a little bit. Well, these tests can really kind of save your butt a little bit, because let's say the way this works right now is it's literally just adding two numbers, right? What if in the future they're like, oh, well, now we want it, if the list contains a string, return null, because we don't want to be able to compute numbers when there's an actual string. It wouldn't make sense in this supposed logic of ours. So you can go ahead and write your new logic in here and then run all your tests to make sure that you didn't break anything else in that logic. I hope that's kind of making sense. I know I'm kind of going off tangents just because it's been a while since I've made a video, but I hope this makes sense. And if it doesn't, don't worry, I'll probably make a few more test related videos, because like I said, it can kind of get complex. But for right now, I really just want to go over the extreme basics and kind of how we can start thinking about tests. So anyways, with that all said, I hope it makes sense. If not, please ask questions down below. But let's go ahead and create an actual Apex test class. So I will go ahead and on the classes, I'll just go ahead and create Apex class. And I'm going to title this Apex Test Basics Test. I know that kind of is convoluted a little bit. As far as naming convention, I don't know if there is an actual like naming convention rule or styling guide in Salesforce. I think it's, basically just go based off whatever your org is doing. One common one I've seen across a few orgs is you just add test at the end of your Apex class name. So, in this case, my Apex class is Apex Test Basics. So my test class would be Apex Test Basics Test. All right, so let's go ahead and create it. And here we are. So what I'm going to do is at the top, I'm going to use an annotation called isTest. And that lets this basically Salesforce or the compiler know that this whole class has to do with test classes or test cases or test methods, sorry. And this is kind of important because, and you might want to like look into it further, but just at a very high level, when you define a class as a test, I believe the code itself doesn't count towards your total like Apex characters limit or something along those lines. It kind of exists in its own separate set of limits. So feel free to look into that. But what I'm going to do here is I'll kind of just leave everything as is right now. Sometimes you'll see that, that Apex test classes are marked as private. It doesn't really matter. Actually, I'm not sure if it does matter. I think most of the time I just denote them as private as well, but we'll leave it as public and we'll see what happens, I guess. All right, so for today, I only want to go over, I guess, just the very basic on how to create a test method. So that'll be the thing that we want to cover for today, because I'm pretty sure this video is already going to be kind of long. And then like my next video, we'll go over like some things like the test setup method and like the test start test or stop test methods as well, and probably some other things. So if you're interested in that, consider subscribing. And also, if you have any things you want to see in specific with tests, let me know. Well, we'll also go over like the the HTTP mock and all that good stuff. But for now, I just want to go over one simple test method. So let's go ahead and start working on that. To define a test method, all you have to do is use the annotation isTest. And then one thing to note is all test methods have to be static and void. So static, and it doesn't return anything. And then here again, the name of the actual method, you might have some type of styling or naming convention guide that you follow in your organization or whatever. But what I like to use is, I'll just start off with saying test. And in this case, what do we want to test? We're going to just test that. Let's see, we're going to test that we can add numbers. I guess we'll just call it that. So we're going to test add integers, I guess, in this case. And we'll leave it like that. And then here, we're going to have our actual test logic itself. So I'm going to go ahead and cheat a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and kind of just grab this right here. And we'll go in here and just paste it. And let me format it a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by just creating, initializing, declaring our numbers list of strings. And this time I'll change it to maybe we'll do like 5, 1, and 5. So, that'll be 11. And here we're again just calling our static method add numbers. We're storing it here. And lastly, what we want to do is we want to have some way of checking to make sure that what we receive here is actually what we expect it to. And the way we do that is by using a method on the system class called assert. And you'll see here as I'm typing out, there's a lot of them. So there's assert equals, assert not equals, and whatever. And you see here that some of them have different params, arguments. I always forget which one is which. For now, we're going to use assert equals, and I'm going to choose the one that has 3. Is it parameters? Yeah, parameters, arguments, whichever one is the correct one. But you'll see here, when I type that out, it auto-completed for us, and you'll see here the first one is expected, The next one is actual, and then there's a message. So to kind of explain the way it works is, basically we're going to do a comparison. What do we expect the first value to be? And just going off what this add numbers function is supposed to do, it's supposed to add these values here, right? We're expecting to receive 11 because it's 5 plus 1 plus 5 should be 11. So we can just type out right here, 11. Now, what is the actual, value we're getting? We can just use the sum variable right here and put it as sum. Now this message, this third param argument, whatever it is, message, it is a string right here. And this will basically be displayed to you when you run your test if this assertion fails. So we'll say add numbers, or we'll just say add numbers did not return, we'll just say 11. And basically it's just a little message to kind of, give you an idea as to why it didn't work. It's just something you can put in there. Again, I'm just going over the very basics of it. In the future, we'll get much more in depth and, I guess a bit more correct as to how things should work. Okay, so we have our assertion right here. This will let us know, if adding integers is working correctly. And like I said, this test method right here now will always test to make sure that integers are being added correctly. And if we were to go back in here in our logic and in the future we get another requirement and the requirement somehow breaks the adding of integers, we could run our test and we'll know very quickly that's, we broke something, our logic changes or something like that. All right, so with this here now, I'm going to go ahead and deploy this to my org. So deploy source to org. And it looks like we have an error. Comparison arguments must be compatible types, integer, string. Okay, so yep, that's completely my fault. We are comparing an integer and a string, and if we recall, for some reason, this add numbers function that I created is returning a string. So let's go ahead and fix that, and we'll try to deploy it one more time. And there we go. So it successfully ran. Now let's go ahead and just click this link right here, run all tests. I'm clicking that, you'll see here that it's running the test. And also go into the actual just developer console, and I'll show you guys how to do it from there as well if you're not familiar. But you'll see here now that the test finished running, and we'll see here, this Apex test basics, it passed because we only have one actual method called test add integers. We got 100% pass rate. That's how long it took. There's no message because it passed. Now, let's kind of just change it a little bit just to kind of show something that isn't a pass. What if the assertion, fails, right? So obviously 5 plus 1 plus 5 is not 5, but let's just try it. So, and we'll say here, yep, that's fine. Let's deploy source to org. Okay, and let's run all tests one more time. And now we see here that it actually failed. And you'll see here that now we have a message, system assertion exception, add numbers did not return 11. So essentially, this is where the message comes from. This one failed obviously because, 5 is not 11, right? And I think I'll cap it from there. Actually, yeah, let's go ahead and show you guys how to do this just from the developer console as well. So I will jump back into my org, and let's go ahead and just open up the developer console very quickly. And I have a bunch of logs for some reason. That's fine. Okay, let's go ahead and look for our Apex test basics test right here. And all we have to do is, we can either click on this run test button, or we can go to test and just do a new run. I'm going to go ahead and just do run test right here. It's going to run it synchronously because I didn't check this asynchronously checkbox right there, but that's fine. You'll see here, let's go to our test tab right here. And right here we have a failure. If I double click it, you'll see here that we have a fail, and it shows us, our message right there, did not return 11, expected 5, actual 11. Just very simple, just to show you guys how it's done in the developer console if that's something you're interested in doing instead. But like I said, just a very simple overview of tests in Apex. And like I said, in the next few videos I do, we'll go over the test setup, test start, stop, HTTP mock, maybe like testing, triggers as well, things like that, and just a bunch of other stuff. So I hope you guys found this useful. Probably not the greatest tutorial I've made so far, but yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe if you found this useful, and I'll see you guys later.